What's up, everybody? It is officially game week. We've got all the latest SEC news you need to know for week one with a tidbit from all 16 teams. Locked On SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along on today's show. Since it is game week, we're going to bring you a tidbit or note on all 16 teams on today's show with a mix of recruiting news, what some of the college game day guys had to say, and much more. But I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to everydayers. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate College Football Head Coach. It's a brand new mobile game that is completely free, has no ads, and 100% playable offline. Use our promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. Begin your coaching legacy today. All right, we got plenty to jump into, so let's dive into it. My, oh my, it's game week. Can you feel it? We got SEC football happening later this week. But before we get to the SEC, a quick thought on what took place over the weekend. Florida State. It was the one big college football game that we had over the weekend. Georgia Tech pulled off a nice upset of number 10 Florida State. A few things here. Number one, with the 10th ranked Seminoles already taking a loss, it's basically guaranteed that number 11 Mizzou will move into the top 10 next week after they beat Murray State. So I'm sure they'll be happy with that. LSU, they could jump ahead of Florida State if they beat USC. Tennessee and Oklahoma, the Vols get Chattanooga, the Sooners get Temple. They're 15th and 16th. You have to think with wins this week, they may be able to jump past FSU in the polls. But I know Eli Drinkwitz is smiling knowing Mizzou should have been a preseason top 10 team, but they were 11th, and the team that was 10 loses in week 0, so Mizzou most likely to move up there. Now, one other note on this game. For the Florida Gators, we're going to see what FSU looks like by November 30th, but if you're a Gator fan, maybe you'll look at that last game of the regular season as a little bit more winnable now. The Seminoles did not look great defensively. DJ Hewitt, quarterback, didn't look great. So if you're a Gator fan, you come out, you're probably laughing at FSU taking a loss in week 0. Again, plenty of season to go. We got to get all the way to the season finale. But if you're a Florida fan, maybe you're saying, everybody's been saying, oh, that Florida schedule, it's so brutal down the stretch. Maybe they look at that one and go, well, we might be able to beat Florida State. And for Georgia, as confident as you are in your squad, maybe you look at that game on November 29th a little differently. You host Georgia Tech, a scrappy team, well coached by Brent Key. Haynes King looked pretty good at quarterback, very physical runner. Not saying dog fans should worry about it, but if Georgia Tech plays like that most of the year, it won't just be that automatic easy W and a little clean old-fashioned hate. The Yellow Jackets did beat Georgia back in 2014 and 2016, so it has happened in recent history. All right, let's dive into it. Plenty to discuss in the conference. So let's get into the SEC tidbits for each and every team. We'll start with the Texas Longhorns. They got a huge commitment over the weekend for the class of 2025, a commitment from 5-star defender Jonah Williams. Could play either safety or linebacker. Massive addition for Texas's recruiting class. He's the number 10 overall player and the number 1 linebacker in the country. According to the 24/7 Sports Composite, he's the number 3 player from the state of Texas. And he had offers from Texas A&M, Ohio State, LSU, among others. And he is headed to Texas. And he is one of 2 5-stars now in Texas's class, joining receiver Kaylee Lockett. Texas's class now ranks number 7 nationally. And really the latest 24/7 Sports Composite team rankings as of this recording. Ohio State is 1, Alabama 2, LSU 3, Georgia 4, Auburn 5, Tennessee 6, Texas 7, Texas A&M 8, and Oklahoma 9. It is basically the top 9 teams. Again, this is 24/7 Sports Composite rankings for the class of 2025. It's Ohio State and basically the entire SEC like in the top 9. It's unbelievable. But one other Texas tidbit here. Texas running back C.J. Baxter underwent successful surgery on Tuesday in Dallas. He had his LCL and ACL repaired. Now, he did not tear his PCL. That's what they had initially feared. He's still going to miss the year, but he can start his rehab, and the thought is he will be a go for 2025. So C.J. Baxter, wish him the best of luck, but he will not be a factor for the Texas Longhorns this season. All right, over at Auburn, they managed to flip a big-time defensive line prospect away from the defending national champs to Auburn. 4-star phenom Nate Marshall, 6'4", 250-pound defensive lineman from the state of Illinois, was looking like he was heading to Michigan. He committed to play for the Wolverines since April, and he flipped his commitment Friday morning to Auburn. He's the number 46 player in the class of 2025. Ranked as the 6th best defensive lineman in the country, the number 2 player from the state of Illinois. And now he will head to the Auburn Tigers. And Auburn, they are now up to 23 total commitments for the class of 2025. And he's Auburn's 3rd highest ranked commitment in this class. So big time get there for Hugh Freeze and company. In other Auburn news, Kirk Herbstreit on Saturday on College Game Day, they were talking about which SEC teams they liked. And Kirk mentioned which SEC team he thinks could make the most improvement. He said, quote, "I think Auburn is a team everybody is forgetting about. Hugh Freeze calling plays now, Peyton Thorne. It's almost if people just dismiss him. He's got receivers to throw to now. Auburn can be a thorn in the side of that conference." Nick Saban also added, "I think Auburn is going to be the most improved team in the league. I really do." Auburn will open the season at home this weekend against Alabama A&M. Another tidbit from Auburn. Auburn running back Brian Batty has been in a Sarasota hospital in Florida since May after suffering critical injuries in a shooting that took the life of his brother. While he has been released from the hospital and is back home continuing his recovery, his mom shared the news on social media. She said, quote, "Words can't express the joy and thankfulness we feel right now. We have witnessed a miracle, and we know it's because of God's grace." Batty was shot in the head on May 18th in a shopping center parking lot and was in a coma for a long time. And he's back home. And so we wish him the best of luck. Some great news on that front. All right, other SEC news. We normally don't talk about Vanderbilt this early in the show, but look, they're one of the few teams that still is undecided on their starting quarterback. Clark Lee asked a couple days ago for the latest on the competition between quarterback Nate Johnson, the transfer from Utah, and Diego Pavia from New Mexico. And he said he and his offensive staff had discussed several positions. He said, "We talked about all the positions, and certainly quarterback is one of them," but he did not show his hand. So Johnson and Pavia both transferred in this offseason, and one of Lee's previous updates, he shared the pair were still splitting snaps through their scrimmages. So we'll see who wins out. A lot of people expect it's going to be Pavia, but Nate Johnson showed some signs at Utah. His dual threat, so we'll see who ends up winning that job. But you got to think an announcement's coming very soon. They are preparing for their opener this weekend against Virginia Tech. Clark Lee said, we've also done evaluations for all positions. It's been part of our exercise the last few days, just prepping this team to get to game week. Now, one other note on Vandy, Clark Lee is back in the role of defensive coordinator. His attention on game days will primarily be on just the defense. That's why he's got Jerry Kill and Tim Beck in the fold. They will handle the majority of the duties on offense, but Clark Lee will be calling the plays for the defense this season down on the field on game day. And he enters year 4 in Nashville. He is 9-27 overall as a head coach, 2-22 in the SEC. Over at Missouri, they're prepping for their game Thursday night. This Thursday, Mizzou is playing a football game, and their first official depth chart is out. And at running back, they have listed Nate Noel or Marcus Carroll at running back. Carroll spoke with the media on Sunday. He talked about the advantages of having a backfield mate in a guy like Nate Noel. He said it's a blessing to share the workload, not have to be on the hook for every rep. So, look, it's probably we're going to see a good fair share of both these guys in this matchup. But, the expectation or the hope is one guy emerges as that dude. So we'll see if it's Marcus Carroll or Nate Noel. I've had several people tell me they think it's going to be Marcus Carroll. So we'll see on that one. Eli Drinkwitz is talking with the media on Sunday also as they prepare for game week. He said this matchup with Murray State is probably the most difficult opening game he's had since he's been at Missouri. He specifically acknowledged how many unknowns this Murray State team presents. He mentioned not knowing scheme or personnel. Former South Carolina tight ends coach Jody Wright just took over as the Murray State head coach. And they said basically there's like not any film. Like, what do we watch? We don't know what the hell they're going to be running. So very interesting. Look, Mizzou's got way better talent than Murray State. It's just one of those interesting dynamics of like, what are they going to run? We don't know what to look at. But Drinkwitz said His playbook will not be limited this week. Look, he's never going to say that, right? That's always the buzz. People are like, oh, you're going to save some plays for, you're not going to show all your hands in week one or show all your cards. So we'll see what the offense looks like. But injury update for Missouri, backup corner Jamarian Wayne and backup tight end Jordan Harris, both battling back from injuries listed as questionable for Thursday night, according to Eli Drinkwitz. All right, thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Coming up next, we'll continue to go around the conference with more tidbits. That's coming your way here in just a second. But first, this episode presented to you by our friends over at Ultimate College Football Head Coach. Look, it's an amazing game and simulation. You get to step into the shoes of a head coach and lead your college football program to glory. Can you imagine actually being able to be the head coach of Texas or Alabama or whatever, from recruiting players and hiring coaching staff to overseeing training camps and handling school scholarships? You control every crucial detail of your program, and it's all in your hands. Will you be able to handle the pressure? Here's what we really love about the game. You're responsible for calling offensive plays during the game, so your strategy will not only determine the success of your football season, but will shape the future and legacy of your program. It's Ultimate College Football HC, completely free, has no ads, 100% playable offline. You can play on the go as you want, when you want to. And of course, we have a special offer for our Locked On SEC fans. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, no spaces, inside the game store. You're going to receive a free boost to your program. Make sure to take advantage of that perk, as it'll get your team off to a strong start. Download the game. Just visit ultimate-cfb.com, and that'll take you straight to the App Store. Ultimate College Football HC. Begin your coaching legacy today. It's a really cool app. Definitely recommend it. All right, roll along here, Locked On SEC. And hey, college football is back. And you should check out Locked On College Football, our sister podcast. They are getting ready for the start of the season. They also have a 4-part series covering each of the 4 major conferences. Be sure to check out that special streaming on Locked On College's 24/7 YouTube channel or on Amazon Fire TV, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. All right, we got to dive back into it as we continue going around the conference, talking about every team in the SEC. And Arkansas, they are the other team that opened this Thursday at War Memorial Stadium in Little Rock, taking on Arkansas Pine-Bluff. And head coach Sam Pittman, this offseason is some variation of you can't be a tough team unless you practice with toughness. You can't be a good tackling team unless you practice tackling. And they have done all of that this offseason. Certainly a more physical football team is what Sam Pittman is looking for this year. On offense, they've worked in some I formation and multiple tight end sets into the mix during camp. He talked about Bobby Petrino, saying he and I are on the same page there. And they got a major road game against Oklahoma State coming up in week 2. So it could be easy for the Razorbacks to overlook an FCS level opponent like Arkansas Pine-Bluff. Now, Pine-Bluff finished 2-9 last year. They're viewed as one of the worst FCS teams in the country. And the Golden Lions head coach Alonzo Hampton spoke with the media over the weekend. He said, there won't be any Golden Lions that are afraid. There won't be any coaches that are afraid to play Arkansas. We're looking forward to an opportunity to go out there and showcase what our players can do. Now, one of those players, Arkansas Pine-Bluff wide receiver Giovanni Gibson, kind of giving some bulletin board material for the Razorbacks over the weekend. He seemed confident in his units, calling them a slow Arkansas secondary. Giovanni Gibson is 6'3", 205 pounds. He's a Louisiana native, transferred to UAPB from University of Arkansas Monticello. He said, quote, in the back end, I don't think they can really cover that much. They're big, but they're slow. We've got a lot of fast receivers that can stretch the field out, and our quarterback can throw the ball. That's what I like. So let's keep an eye on those receivers for Arkansas Pine-Bluff on Thursday night. See if they can get loose. I know those Arkansas DBs are going to want to get their hands on some tip passes and maybe an interception or two. Send a message there. All right, over at Ole Miss, Chris Kiffin, going to be a member of the Ole Miss coaching staff this fall. ESPN's Chris Lowe sharing the news on Sunday afternoon, reporting that Chris Kiffin will be an analyst on Ole Miss's staff this year. He previously worked under his brother Lane at Florida Atlantic, and this will be Chris Kiffin's 3rd stint in Oxford, but the first under Lane. He was a grad assistant at Ole Miss back in 2007. He also served as the program's defensive line coach from 2012 through 2016. And Chris Kiffin does have significant experience at the college level. He has spent the last few seasons in the NFL, most recently working with the Houston Texans, coaching their linebackers in 2023. But this is his first college job since he was Lane's defense coordinator at FAU in 2017. Ole Miss, they got a strong stable of analysts, including former Mississippi State head coach Zach Arnett, former New York Giants head coach Joe Judge. So I got some studs on that staff. Ole Miss, they are heavy favorites against Furman this weekend, currently 42.5-point favorites, according to FanDuel. Now, as for the Rebels, Pat McAfee, he showed them some love over the weekend on College Game Day this past Saturday. He said, quote, "What about Lane Kiffin this year? This feels like Ole Miss's year. Jackson Dart is back. This is the year for Ole Miss and Kiffin to do it. 2 transfers on the defensive line from Texas A&M and Florida. So they beef up that entire thing. Is this the year for Ole Miss?" So Pat McAfee showing some love there for the Ole Miss Rebels. Over at Florida, Miami Central 4-star wide receiver Naeshaun Montgomery committed to the Florida Gators on Sunday. 6'1", 165-pound wideout, and told On3 Sports, "I like how they develop wide receivers. That's why he chose the Florida Gators." But had offers from LSU and others. Said he likes a chance to play in front of a big crowd in Gainesville. And said he likes Ben Hill Griffin Stadium and how the Gator fans love football. But another big-time wide receiver commit for Billy Napier and company. They already had 4-star Vernell Brown, 4-star Joshua Moore, and now another big-time receiver in Naeshaun Montgomery joining the Florida Gators. Now, as for the Gators, they're getting ready for their season, and starting running back Montrell Johnson continuing to recover from that minor knee surgery he had this offseason. Billy Napier saying a few days ago, Montrell's doing fantastic. He's been able to do some things. We expect him to be to participate in practice, whether that's modified or at some point full speed, but we'll continue to update you. Now, many people are expecting sophomore running back Trayon Webb to be the main backup to Montrell Johnson, but true freshman Jaden Baugh and Katie Daniels, as well as JUCO transfer Jacoby Jackson, have all stood out in recent weeks in practice. So something to keep an eye on there. Billy Napier said, experience matters when it comes to running back. He said, it's about more than just finding holes and hitting the open field. So keep an eye on that running back position there for the Florida Gators. Over Georgia, for the first time all year, we heard Georgia coach Kirby Smart and Clemson's Dabo Swinney talk about their matchup coming up in the Affleck kickoff game this weekend. Both coaches talking with the media over the weekend. The top-ranked Bulldogs and number 14 Clemson will face off at noon at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. But Kirby Smart saying, the build-up in your offseason program, there's truth to that. He said, we had signs sitting in our locker room and our weight room with how many days it is till kickoff. Not only do you get to count it down, but it's Clemson. And that catches people's eyes and gives us a little extra adrenaline rush for each and every practice and lift that we have. As for Dabo Swinney, he said it's a big-time TV event. It's Clemson, Georgia. We're 80 miles apart with a lot of history and tradition. You best believe people are going to tune in to watch this one. It's great for college football, great stage, big-time matchup. Whoever wins will create a lot of early momentum in their season. Now, on Saturday, it was Nick Saban talking about his pick for the SEC, and he said, look, I see 6 or 7 teams that have a chance to win the conference, but somebody has to prove they can beat Georgia. He said the only people who have beaten Georgia in the last 2 or 3 years is Alabama. So somebody's got to prove that they can beat the Georgia Bulldogs. So a lot of love there from Nick Saban towards the Georgia Bulldogs. Now, as for the Alabama Crimson Tide, ahead of the 2024 season. How about former college superstar quarterback Matt Leinart dropping some huge praise towards Jalen Milroe, ranking him as his Heisman favorite on his Twitter feed. Matt Leinart taking to his Twitter, releasing a video talking about who he likes this year, and he listed Carson Beck and Jackson Dart and Quinn Ewers on his list of players. But he said, I think with Kalen DeBoer, Jalen Milroe is going to improve so much with his passing. He said, we saw what Coach did with Michael Penix last year. Don't be surprised if another Bama Crimson Tide wins the Heisman Trophy. So Jalen Milroe, Heisman pick there for Matt Leinart of Fox. Now, during his debut appearance on College Game Day on Saturday, Nick Saban touched on the expectations his successor is facing in Tuscaloosa, and Kalen DeBoer. Saban saying, quote, I went and watched last week's scrimmage last Saturday, and that team still has the same culture. When I was the coach, They played with toughness. They played with great effort. They executed well. They got good discipline. So Kalen has done a really good job. And Saban noted the exodus of players after his retirement, especially on defense. He said, I was worried about the defense, but I think the defense really impressed me in this scrimmage that they're coming along. So if they can play the kind of defense, especially in the secondary, because they lost so many players, they're going to be right up there challenging people there. So Nick Saban, still a believer in the Crimson Tide. Over at LSU, much like LSU this offseason, USC, they've got a whole new defensive staff, and there's a lot of parallels between the two. But new coordinator D'Anton Lynn coming over from UCLA. Brian Kelly, talking to the media a few days ago, said it's hard to tell. There's so many transfers there. He said we looked at a lot of UCLA tape to get structure in terms of understanding their defense. But he said because there's so many transfers, it's really hard. We broke them down individually as players. We do a deep dive on each one of them. A lot of individually talented players, but like anything else, they got to play together as a unit. And it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with LSU. One other tidbit on LSU, Nick Saban, a buyer into LSU on College Game Day Saturday morning. He put LSU in his playoff. He said, I think Garrett Nussmeier is going to be one of the all-time sleepers in college football this year, quarterback. He said LSU has skill guys. They're talking about all the receivers they lost. You could shake a tree in Louisiana, and them guys would fall out. One more note on LSU. On Saturday, they picked up in-state cornerback Aiden Anding, becoming the third cornerback to commit to Corey Raymond and the Tigers. Dual sport athlete, also plays basketball and track and field. He's the 25th commitment for LSU's number 3 recruiting class and inching closer to Alabama in the rankings. All right, thank you guys for making a Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Still more to come here on Locked On SEC, part of Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. And this episode presented to you by our friends over at 5 Hour Energy. Look, if you're tired after lunch like we typically are, you're not alone. In fact, research shows that more than 70% of us hit the wall after lunch. Let a 5 Hour Energy shot help you leap over that wall instead of crashing into it. 5 Hour Energy is the brand hardworking people like you have trusted for over 20 years to give them the alert, energized feeling they need to get through a busy, hectic day. You always know where to find 5 Hour Energy shots right at the cash register at nearly every convenience, drug, or grocery store nationwide. Stock up on money-saving multi-packs to make sure you never run out of delicious, energizing 5 Hour Energy shots. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that's the number 5, hourenergy.com. Get some 5 Hour Energy product today. You can use our promo code LOCKEDONCFB. That's going to get you 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th and on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. Code is not good on subscription orders. Go to 5hourenergy.com today and use our code LOCKEDONCFB. Help get you through this college football season with plenty of 5 Hour Energy. All right, we dive back into it. One more segment here on Locked On SEC, and we got to dive into the teams we haven't touched on yet. So let's do that as we jump over to Oklahoma and touch on the Oklahoma Sooners as the Sooners release their official depth chart ahead of their Week 1 matchup coming this Friday night against Temple. And a couple of notes from their depth chart release. Brandon Hickman listed as their starting center. He's the offseason transfer from SMU, so Brandon Hickman will start at center underneath Jackson Arnold's hands. OU has 18 true freshmen on their initial depth chart. Freshman Jaden Jackson listed as a starter at defensive tackle. He'll line up next to TCU transfer Dominic Williams. One move of note, number 16 defensive end freshman Danny Okoye. He was listed on the depth chart at defensive end, freshman who may get some early playing time in the rotation there. They announced their game captains also for this week will be quarterback Jackson Arnold, linebacker Danny Stutzman, safety Billy Bowman, and tight end Bauer Sharp. By the way, Billy Bowman also listed as the team's starting kick returner. Over at Kentucky, they're getting ready for their matchup against Southern Miss. They will start this year in the Bluegrass in front of a crowd at Kroger Field. And heading into the season, Cats have a whole new staff of players in that quarterback room, featuring Brock Vandergrift, the transfer from Georgia, Gavin Wimsatt, Cutter Boley, and the return of Bo Allen. Despite all his new faces, Mark Stoops said he likes what he sees from his quarterback room. Said, I feel really good about them. Absolutely no knock to anyone that's been here before, but as a group, the 4 guys that we have, I have so much confidence in. It's a really good group. Stoops went as far to say as he believes this team would be in good hands if any of the 4 players had to take the field. Over at Tennessee, Josh Heupel, he's got a list of names on his depth chart at left guard, but he talked to the media a few days ago, said no depth chart being handed out just yet, not putting the names in order in the left guard competition. But he did say that the competition there has been really good throughout the preseason. He said Andre Carrick missed a couple of days, but he came right back. He's played well. Sham played really well there as well. Jackson Lampley has versatility to play multiple sides as well there. Now, Carrick is the favorite to be the guy there at left guard, and later today, depending on what time you're listening to this, we are expecting Tennessee to put out their depth chart for the Chattanooga game, and we should see who is listed there at left guard. Over at Texas A&M, week 1 of the college football season ready to go, and the Aggies gearing up for their opener against number 7 Notre Dame. According to FanDuel, the Aggies still setting about 2.5-point favorites, despite the fact they lost running back Reuben Owens just a week ago. Got a new head coach in Mike Elko, installing a new offense with a new OC in Colin Klein. A lot of new. Now, for the Irish, they're coming to the Kyle Field with a new quarterback and transfer Riley Leonard. And, of course, he played for Mike Elko over at Duke. We'll hear from Mike Elko later today. We know he'll address the media, and almost certainly will answer a lot of questions about what Riley Leonard brings at quarterback. And he'll also be asked questions about seeing Leonard in the green and gold for the first time for the Fighting Irish. But that game's set for Saturday night at Kyle Field, 6:30 kickoff. I just find it very interesting that A&M, despite being ranked 20th and Notre Dame a top 10 team at number 7, that the Aggies still sitting at about a 2.5-point favorite in this one. Over in South Carolina, Shane Beamer had his first coaches show Thursday night ahead of their matchup this weekend against Old Dominion. And he mentioned a couple of players that won't be ready for the opener. Offensive lineman Ja'Kai Moore and Aaron Parks, dealing with injuries, will not be ready to go for this weekend. Beamer said Parks rolled his ankle, will be out for a while. Said he's optimistic about a midseason return for Aaron Parks, who transferred in from Oklahoma this spring. Moore missed both scrimmages this preseason, but Beamer didn't specify his injury on Thursday. So we'll see what happens with both of those guys. Last year, the Gamecocks lost 6 offensive linemen to season-ending injuries throughout the year. Over at Mississippi State, they are getting ready for the debut of Jeff Lebby, and Lebby is the 10th coach hired in the last 50 years by Mississippi State. Previous 9 had mixed results in their first seasons as the new head coach, but Lebby and his new staff, they completely flipped this roster this offseason, adding a fresh new recruiting class of 25 new enrollees from high school and JUCO, along with 19 transfers, and nearly half of the 85 names on the scholarship have been replaced in the short time since Jeff Lebby took over. Now, Jeff Lebby talked about his wide receiver room just last week. Talented trio of transfer portal wide receivers, Creed Whittemore, Jordan Mosley, are another duo who have been in the program for a couple years. Lebby saying, I think we have good players in that room, and I believe we've gotten to the point where we have high-quality depth. When we get into it, we can play from 7 to 8 guys from that receiver room, and we count on those guys to play some winning football for us. So it'll be interesting to see what that Mississippi State offense and really team overall looks like when the Bulldogs hit the field this weekend. All right, that is going to do it for this edition of Locked On SEC. Thank you guys for making us your first listen every day. Now you can go check out Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, getting you ready for another exciting season on the gridiron. You can find the link to Locked On College Football in the description of this show, so you don't need to go search for it. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. I'm Chris Gordy. This has been Locked On SEC. It's game week. It's here. We finally made it. You guys go rock it, and we'll talk to you tomorrow right here on Locked On SEC. We'll be previewing some of the games. We'll make our predictions. We've got some great shows lined up throughout this week. Make sure you stay locked and subscribe to Locked On SEC, wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube.